So let's talk about something I didn't mention when you were here. Um, so when it comes to the fingers that you end up using playing all these scales and whatnot, there's something I like to call finger confusion. And basically that means kind of like what you were doing, like you would at first you went up with one pair of fingers and then went down with a different pair of fingers. So that is something I see resulting in finger confusion because you're basically training your hand to do two different things when it comes to one particular pattern of how notes are spaced out. So ultimately, it's going to be up to you what you decide you use finger-wise. But again, it's like as long as if you get us, if the first, third, and fourth seems natural, and you tend to notice that happens more often than not, I think that's a good idea to stick with that. If the first, second, and fourth tends to happen more often than not, then stick with that. I mean, you have been playing a long time, so some guitarists do it like that, the first, second, and fourth. I do it the first, third, and fourth. I do have a bit of an explanation as to why I think that's a good way to do it. So I have this finger confusion exercise that I'll give people sometimes. So basically, when you're playing these scale shapes, you have three patterns you're going to be working with. You either have, from your first finger, you go up a whole step followed by another whole step, or you go up a whole step followed by a half step. And the other pattern is you go up a half step followed by a whole step. So every time you're playing these, it's one of those three patterns being used on each string. The open strings don't count. So the exercise is this, and you can start it anywhere really, but you can start on the 5th fret. First, I usually start it on the 1st fret because you develop more of a stretch this way. But so the exercise is you go 1st, 2nd, 4th fret, and then you go 1st, 3rd, 4th fret, and then 1st, 3rd, 5th fret. So the reason why I like setting up like this is because, let's say we do the same exercise idea, but we don't play the third note on each string. So you notice when I went up, I went 1st, 2nd, 4th, 1st, 3rd, 4th, 1st, 3rd, 4th. So I'm going to not play the third note there. So it would be 1st, 2nd, 1st, 3rd, 1st, 3rd. So I'm really big on using the same fingers for the same pattern as much as possible. There's always going to be an exception to the rule somewhere down the road, but as far as building solid habits, solid practice routines and whatnot, and having really good muscle memory built in, is practicing it the same way as much as possible. For every time you have the same pattern come up, do it the same way as much as possible. So this way when you start playing fast, your hand instinctively knows what to do already. So anyway, so let's say you do the big stretch with your 1st, 2nd, and 4th. This is the issue that I see coming up. So again, I'll play all of it. So you got 1st, 2nd, 4th, 1st, 3rd, 4th, and then you go 1st, 2nd, 4th again. And the same thing, go back down. So this time I'm going to play without the third note on each string. So you got 1st, 2nd, 1st, 3rd, 1st, 2nd. See, my way of thinking about that is you had 1st and 3rd here because you're going up a whole step from your first finger. Then you're going up a whole step from the first finger again, but you're using a different finger. Yes, it's sometimes easier for people to hit that stretch this way, but just again, from the way I see things, in my mind, it makes more sense to use the third finger because you're going up a whole step from that first finger. And you tend to use the ring finger anyway, so why not just continue to use it every single time? The exception to that rule, or one exception is, again, you've been playing for so long and you're just used to doing it that way. Sometimes that happens. It just naturally comes out that way. So if it really does feel natural to go first, second, fourth for the bigger stretch, just make sure you do that every single time. Another exception is this one riff from a band many years ago I was in. This was the riff. And I had a lot of trouble playing it because I'd always do the first, third, and fourth. And then one day I was like, well, why don't I just do the first, second, and first instead? And that actually made it easier because of going into that pattern right there. It just made it's to me, because I keep going back and forth between these two fingers more than anything. Feels like that is an exception to the rule right there, where it seemed to make more sense for this riff to go first, second, and fourth. But again, exceptions to any rule. So that's just something to think about as far as helping you decide what's going to be best for your hand personally. The other thing didn't talk about, so I noticed that you sit more like the traditional rock style, I like to call it. You got a guitar on the right leg. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you're able to hit stretches pretty well, which is good, but just something to try. Whenever I'm playing stuff that is pretty serious, involved technicalities and whatnot, or very, very technical, I should say, and difficult stuff. It's where I really want to concentrate on what's going on. You can see this in here. I sit like a classical player, and I angle my neck. This has always helped me hit my stretches far easier than and keeping my elbow tucked in is another thing that's been very crucial, and keeping my thumb in the center of my hand to help with the stretches. I'm pretty sure you already do that. You keep your thumb in the middle of your hand. So I think you're good there, because you're able to hit the stretches okay. But here's an idea. Just try holding it like this. And so yeah, on the left leg, up at an angle. So sometimes guys will do that, and then they'll hold it like this still. It's like, well, if you still have a flat neck, that defeats the purpose of holding it on the left leg, because now it's even harder to do, because now you have even further to stretch. But this way, it helps put your arm and your wrist and your fingers in a much easier angle. That's why you see classical players holding it this way, because they have the classical guitar, which has a bigger neck, or wider neck, and they're doing a lot of crazy chords. This position allows them to put their hands in the more difficult shapes, chord positions, and so on. So, something to try. Holding it this way, whenever I do that, I lean over quite a bit and tuck my elbow in. I'm basically like elbowing myself in the gut when I'm doing this stuff. So this way, I'm still positioning my arm and my wrist in pretty much the same position I would if I was holding it on my left leg. So, just some things to think about posture-wise and whatnot. I'm not going to run through the scale shapes, because you seem to understand that pretty well. So, the alternate picking exercise we looked at, so this is a reminder, so play it 4 ways. So treat it separately. You're not going to run through it 4 times and then change how many times you're picking it. So you got the repeat there, which is important because we're working on like some endurance stuff as well, and just again locking into that back and forth motion. So like when you're playing it 4 times each note, with the repeat it'll go like this. So it'll take a little bit of time when you start off slow, but that's part of the point, is just playing that back and forth for quite some time and really putting it in your subconscious. So the 3 times each note, This is where it can get confusing because once you do your down, up, down, you got to go past the string to hit the next upstroke. So you'd have down, up, 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 down, up. And so on. The 2-1. This one's pretty simple as far as making sure you're on the correct direction with your pick. It's just the faster you go, the harder it is because you got to move that left hand faster. And then the 1 time each, it's the most challenging one. And so on. So this is the most challenging because you have to have your left hand and right hand synced up the whole time. So, and you're also, but you got your downstroke here, you got to go past the string to hit the upstroke, downstroke, upstroke, and then go past the string again, so you hit that downstroke and have that synced up strict alternate picking. So I'm going to do my best to send you a link to a video I did about working with the metronome, so you get some tips on that. But basically, the gist of it is going to be work up slowly with a metronome. Start at a comfortable pace. I recommend 60 beats a minute because this gives you a full second per beat to get things going. So a couple ways you can run through these. Like the first one, since you're doing it 4 times each, you can certainly do 4 notes a beat. So every time your metronome clicks, you're doing the 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 and so on. If it's too fast and you need to have more time to lock into the beat, just do 2 notes a beat. You're still going to pick each note 4 times. You're just going to have only 2 picks every beat. When you get to the 3 times each note, it's probably easiest to play triplets at that point, so that's playing 3 notes every time it beeps. The 2 times each note, when you're playing each note twice, again, you can do the 4 notes each beat, so you'd be going to 2 different notes that way, or you can do 2 notes each beat, and so you'd be changing which note you're on every time it clicks. And then the 1 time each. So if you played 1 note just every single time it clicked, if you started at 60 beats a minute, that's if it feels good, do that. It could be too slow at first, so you might want to try just doing 2 notes a beat on that one. But just see what feels right to you, what you're able to concentrate on, because if the biggest thing is if you notice you keep making mistakes, you're going too fast. That's always the good rule of thumb. So yeah, I'll send that link off in the video recap email I send, so this way you can check that out too. And yeah, let me know if you got any questions throughout the week, and if not, we'll just see you when you come in next Friday. Alright, we'll see ya.